Welcome to the show. Welcome to a brand new day, Tuesday, and a brand new month as well. I had to double check and make sure I've got my day right. July 1st, aka Bobby Bonia Day. Cindy, thanks for the reminder to everyone. Smash that like button as you come in. Tonight, we've got some Texas A&M football to talk about. Notre Dame, of course, hosts the Aggies in early September in their home opener this season. It's the second year in a row the Irish and Aggies have gone head-to-head, and it's also the second year in a row we've been able to talk to our old buddy Carter Karels about some Texas A&M football. So we're going to start the show. Carter's going to come in, going to talk some Texas A&M, and then after that, of course, you're going to have a little bit of Vince DeDario. He'll join me for some rapid fire, and we will fire it up in rapid fire. So without any further ado, let's welcome our guest of honor. We're joined by our old friend Carter Karels. He covers Texas A&M, of course, for Gig'em 24/7 down in the land of Texas. Thanks for jumping in with us today, Carter.
Absolutely, Sean. Happy to join you and talk some A&M Notre Dame. Always a cool matchup for me. Just my background and.
That's right. I should mention off the top for anyone who's forgot, Carter was on with us last year, of course, but Carter was he was a recruiting guru for the South Bend Tribune and IndyInsider.com for a few years before he headed out 4 years ago, and he's been at Florida State and Texas A&M is your alma mater, correct? Yep. That's right. Yep. That's what I was thinking. I had that right. I knew that you were from Texas, obviously, but yeah. So. Back down there in College Station now. Well, I guess I'll just start with this. You know, Notre Dame and A&M played that highly anticipated, hard-fought game to start the season down there, and Texas A&M rebounded really nicely after that. They rattled off 7 straight wins, and they were looking like, hey, maybe this is going to be an SEC title contender, college football playoff team, and all that kind of stuff, but the wheels kind of came off down the stretch. They lost what 4? They went 1-4 down the stretch after that, right? So I guess big picture, what went wrong for the Aggies at that last month plus of the season last year, Carter?
Yeah, it was a few different things. One, Connor Wigman was hurt for a lot of the season, got hurt against Notre Dame, and never just quite lived up to the hype. And so they ended up benching him, putting Marcel Reed in. And Marcel Reed did a good enough job, but the offense that you were expecting with Wigman was different than what it ended up being. Then you lose Le'Veon Moss for the season against South Carolina right at the beginning of November. And that really changed this running game. It really changed that offense, losing him as a second-team All-SEC guy. But the biggest thing, the third thing, is the defense really crumbling down the stretch. Those first 7 games, including against Notre Dame, they were excellent. Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, those guys, they looked awesome. And then things just really started to kind of fall off down the stretch. And, I think part of it was they were playing out of their minds those first 8 weeks of the season. And then it wasn't just regressing to the mean. It was like it went the totally different direction. You talk to Mike Elco, he'll say, hey, it almost felt like we played better than we should have the first 8 weeks. And then down the stretch, we played worse than they should have. So that's kind of the way he's talked about it. And there are reasons for that. You can talk about injuries and such, but it was really a meltdown in every facet. I mean, they were struggling with tackling. They were struggling against the run. They were struggling in coverage. They had a lot of coverage busts on the back end. And so you could blame Le'Veon Moss getting hurt. You could blame the quarterback situation. But to me, number one has to be the defense because in those games against South Carolina, USC, Auburn, you're giving up 40-plus points and a whole bunch of yards and not getting a lot of stops. And that's really what ended up being the difference, I think.
Well, Connor Wigman, you mentioned him and you talked about the hype, and there was a great deal of hype on him last year. And as you mentioned, he was apparently hurt in the Notre Dame game. Was it a shoulder
Yeah.
that he ended up hurt? Yeah. So I, I don't know. Like you said, Marcel Reed ultimately replaced him. Do you think it was strictly the injury that he suffered that he tried to play through, or were there bigger things than that for him?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. Where it's first the injury and getting through that. The next week he played against McNeese State for a half, and he actually played fairly decent. And then he re-aggravated it in practice leading up to the Florida game. And so it was one of those things where he tried to play through it, and then he re-aggravates it. And then it kind of becomes this mental game of like, oh man, I don't want to get hit, or I don't want to, embrace contact if I'm running, because then what happens if I hit my shoulder hard again? So I think part of it's mental, and then part of it's just, hey, when your throwing shoulder is hurt like that, of course you're not going to be as effective as a passer. But there was some alarming stuff in his game, in certain games that he played, where you thought that this can't just be the injury; it has to be mental too, because he's making the wrong decisions and not putting the ball in a good place. And so he had his moments, like the Missouri game. He was phenomenal in that game, and it's the reason why when he came back from injury, they said, okay, Marcel Reed, you led us to a 3-0 record against Florida, Arkansas, and Bowling Green, but Connor Wigman, upside, potential, all that, there's a reason why he was the starter going into the season. So they gave it back to him, and in his first game, he lights it up against Missouri, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the reason why it happened. But it ended up being an anomaly. He just could not be consistent week in, week out. And, the thing with Connor is like you'd always see that potential with him, where you'd say, man, you even look back at the Miami game in 2023, and you look back at the LSU and the Ole Miss game in 2022, and you say, man, this guy's really talented. I fully understand why he's a 5-star guy. He just never could do it across a large sample size. He'd either get hurt, he'd either have consistency issues, or it'd be kind of this mental thing where if the circumstances weren't perfect around him, he wouldn't be as good. If receiver got hurt, or if his offensive line wasn't playing as well, it was hard for him to always bring it the way he did in those games where he really showed out. So a combination of things, but I think the injury and the mental aspect just really weighed him down.
And of course, now he has transferred to Houston. So Marcel Reed, is he definitely the guy going into 2025? The guy who took over for Wigman, obviously.
Yeah, definitely the guy. He really showed some positive signs last year. Dealt a pretty bad hand. I mean, you're basically throwing him in first game of first start for him in his career was at Florida. And I know Florida's not amazing, but that road environment, and basically with 2 or 3 days notice being told, hey, you're the starting quarterback at Florida as a redshirt freshman, that's not easy. And, he led them to that 3-0 record. Then he gets taken out. He's not the starting quarterback anymore. Then he gets put back in against South Carolina and against LSU. And then his starting running back gets hurt. They were playing without their starting center all year. Then the defense isn't playing well, and you're really having to overcome a lot of different things. And I don't think he put up like the most amazing numbers, but when he needed to deliver in timely moments, he did. Arkansas, he led them to a game-winning touchdown drive. Against LSU, they're down 17-7. He comes in the second half, lights it up. They win 38-23. Against Auburn and USC, he had game-winning touchdown drives at the end. But then the defense faltered, and that's the reason why they lose those games, because they're giving up 40-plus points. Right. So again, didn't put up the craziest numbers, but he delivered in critical moments, and he didn't turn the ball over, and he was pretty efficient. And so if he can just take his game to a little bit higher of a level, especially as a passer this fall, I just think he's going to be set up so well to succeed because A&M brought back its top 7 offensive linemen. They brought back their top 4 running backs. Before Moss went down last year, I think they were 10th in the country in rushing offense. And so if you have one of the best and the most experienced offensive lines, you have one of the best, most experienced running back rooms, and then you can do a whole lot with your legs and you're not turning the ball over, you can just take a little bit of a step forward as a passer, then, hey, you're going to be pretty good. And, they also added some guys in the portal that I think will help. Casey Concepcion, the receiver out of NC State. I think he'll be the number 1 receiver for this group, a pretty proven guy out of the ACC. Then they got Mario Craver from Mississippi State, and that's kind of that speed guy that you were lacking last year in this offense. So I think they've bolstered their receiving core compared to what they were last season. So he's going to have a better supporting cast, another year in the system. And I think he's shown enough to make you think, hey, this could be a pretty good quarterback next year.
That's what I was going to ask you about the receivers. I mean, and you mentioned the guys that, they went out and added some guys, and, like you looked at what they had and the production that they had last year, it was, just kind of seemed fairly average. Do you expect this group that they brought in from the portal to be a pretty considerable upgrade to what they had last year?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are calling it considerable upgrade. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I think it's definitely an upgrade. But, are they going to have a 1,000-yard receiver? Are they going to have a first-round draft pick or anything like that? I don't know. I don't see it yet. But, last year it was a tough receiving group. They weren't great. I mean, the one guy that really delivered.
I'm glad you said it because, again, it's like, one game and it just, yeah.
Yeah, and against Notre Dame, my goodness, it was bad, right?
Yeah,
it was like, yikes. And Noah Thomas was kind of the difference maker out of the group, and he transferred to Georgia. People will minimize that loss. It was a big loss because he gave you something as a 6'6" guy, red zone target that you probably don't have this year. So that will be something worth considering. But what they did not have last year was speed and guys that could, stretch a defense vertically. And I think they have that with Mario Craver being added to the mix. I think Casey Concepcion is going to be more of your, 7-catch, 80 yards guy where he's going to get a lot of catches. He's going to get a lot of short and intermediate stuff. He can be in the slot. He can be in the outside. Terry Bussey is somebody who, as a true freshman, got a lot of action at receiver and was kind of dealing with injuries to start the year. So I don't think he had his best football season that he could have had last year. And so he could be somebody who, going into that second year, he could have that second year jump. And then they like a lot of their younger guys that they're bringing in. Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel Roman are 2 true sophomores that I think could get a lot of rotation into this receiving core. The true freshman Jerome Miles is a really highly rated receiver that they signed out of the 25 class who could get a lot of time too. So it looks like a little bit deeper of a group, but the biggest thing is just the speed and creating separation because, they had size last year. They had 6'6" Noah Thomas. They had 6'4" Jade Walker. But they just could not get open. Every catch they were making was a DB right in their face and having to come down with a crazy catch. This time, I think they'll be able to create some space. And, I still don't expect it to be like the most explosive passing offense you've ever seen, but I think it'll be good enough where when you can supplement that with a running game that you're going to have, this elite running game, it should be pretty effective.
I think you touched on their offensive line. Feels like that could be like, do you think the strength of this team right now going into training camp here pretty soon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the best position group because not only are you bringing back 7 guys, which is really unheard of in your transfer
No
portal,
kidding.
NIL era, getting back your top 7 offensive linemen just doesn't happen. It also doesn't happen that you have this many combined game experience and starts. I mean, they've made, I think, 200 combined, at least 200 combined starts among those 7. But then you've got NFL talent too. Your left tackle Trey Zune and your right guard Armaje Reed Adams were 2 guys that probably would have been drafted 3rd day last year, but they decided to both come back. And Armaje Reed Adams is already getting talked about as either the best offensive guard in the country or best offensive guard prospect for the 2026 draft. And then you've got at left guard Chase Bisonis, who has NFL written all over him. And if he's your second best offensive guard, you're in great shape. Your center and your right tackle is where there are more questions, but you've got good depth there. You've got guys who have played a lot of games there. And if those 2 guys are your worst offensive linemen, you're in pretty good shape because those are guys that have played a lot of games. I would expect it to be Mark Naboo at center. He'll be battling with Coley Fayu for that spot. And Mark Naboo was the starting center for them last year, and he went down with a season-ending injury against Notre Dame. So we didn't quite see him have that full season as the starting center, but they have a lot of high hopes in him. So that's why it's kind of a question mark. And then right tackle, it's been Demetrius Crownover for the most part. You might see a little Ruben Fothery, but Demetrius Crownover, this will be his 3rd year as a starter. And again, all these guys have been starters for at least 3 years, counting this upcoming season. So when you have that much experience, it bodes well because what we know about offensive lines is it's all about experience and gelling and working together as a unit, and I think they'll have that this season.
So the other side of the ball, seems like there are definitely more questions over there. I saw a quote from Mike Elco from after the Las Vegas Bowl where he said that basically their secondary couldn't cover the forward pass, which is, in 2024, 2025, that seems like a pretty good issue. Pretty significant issue. Do you think that they're going to be improved there in the secondary this year?
I do. The question is how much improved. It's kind of like the receiver situation where you feel better about it, but is it head over shoulders better will be the question. I think the number one thing that's great is they bring back Will Lee, who was another guy that probably could have gone day 3 in the NFL. He was 2nd team All SEC last year. He was big time for this group, one of the better players on the defense, and he's back at outside corner. They also bring back Tyreek Chappelle, who went down with a season-ending injury kind of the second week of practice after that Notre Dame game. That following week of practice, he went down. They lost him for the whole season, and Mike Elko's talked about it. He said this probably might have been the best player on the defense, at least the best player in the secondary, and that's over Will Lee, who was 2nd team All SEC. And Tyreek Chappelle, that was going to be his 4th season as a starter. His 1st season at nickel. He'd previously been, an outside cornerback. And so to have those 2 guys is a great starting point. And then you bring back everybody else. You bring back your top 3 safeties. You bring back Des Ricks, who really struggled at corner last year, but as a former 5-star recruit and a guy that, has the athletic traits necessary to play that position, I think it's just a matter of learning the defense better and knowing what he's doing. There's a lot of busted coverages in that sense. It was a lot more mental than it was physical, I felt. They bring in Julian Humphrey, who was, a starting cornerback for Georgia for most of last season. And they bring back another corner with starting experience in Javon Thomas. So you've got a lot of experience back there. You've got 2 guys that are all conference caliber. And then the other shift worth noting is Mike Elco, after last season, not only did he say they can't defend the forward pass, but he said they don't know how to play zone defense, zone coverage, which, last time I checked, that's pretty important to playing defense.
Exactly.
And so as a defensive mind, he's decided, okay, I'm going to be a lot more involved now. I'm not going to fire anybody. I'm not going to demote anybody, but I'm going to be the guy calling the defense and helping out with what's going on. And he's has a background as kind of a safeties specialist. He also brought in the defensive coordinator from James Madison, Lyle Hemphill, to kind of help with the safeties. They now have like 3 secondary coaches. And so there's a lot of an emphasis on improving the secondary, improving the defense, having Elco more involved. And, you look at Elco's track record, last year really was an anomaly. Like, that does not happen often for him, where the whole defense just crumbles. And they had the talent. So it's one of those things where it wasn't like they just had a bad group and they couldn't do much with it. They underachieved as a group. So there's a lot more focus there. They added some guys in the portal, and they brought a lot back, at least from the back end of the defense. And so I think that's why there's reasons for optimism. But again, when you have a lot of the same characters from last season, you just wonder, how much better is it going to be? Is it going to be a strength? Probably not. But if it can just be serviceable, I think that'll be good for this team.
Yeah. The last thing you would expect from a Mike Elco team is that the defense would be the issue, like just based on everything that we know about him from here and, just his track record. The other aspect of the defense, though, is they lost 3 defensive linemen to the NFL. They were obviously really good up front. So how are they set down in the trenches on that side of the ball?
Yeah, that was another disappointment last year. Like, Nick Gordon starts off the season on fire. Last half of the season doesn't do anything. Jamar Stewart, so much hope. He told us, hey, I'm going to have 15 sacks this season. He had 1.5. Like, he had 10% of what he said he was going to do.
Wow.
Shamar Turner, he was drafted in the 2nd round. He had a bad season. He was a liability, honestly, from the standpoint of run defense and getting a lot of penalties. He was hurt. He had a pretty significant leg injury throughout the year. But you just look at that D-line, and they just left so much on the table. And so it is going to be tough losing those 3 guys. But you can also say, hey, it could not have gone much worse last year. They really, really, really underachieved. And so putting some new guys in there and changing up the scheme a little bit may pay off for them. And, there's a couple guys coming in that I think you feel good about. Cassius Howe, I think he's the biggest name to know up front for them. I think he's your guy who's probably going to lead the team in sacks this year. He was the top defensive end backup behind Scorton and Stewart last year. And played a lot less snap than those guys and was just as effective as those guys from a statistical standpoint. The concern with him is run defense and penalties. He had problems in those areas. But from a pure pass rushing standpoint, he can really get out after the quarterback and wreak havoc. They brought in a couple other guys. TJ Searcy out of Florida has a lot of experience at defensive end, a lot of production there. Tyler Onyedem, the defensive tackle out of Iowa State, was 3rd team All Big 12 a couple years ago, and someone who brings a lot of position versatility, can play all across the defensive line. They bring back some guys that have played a lot of snaps, like Albert Regis and DJ Hicks in the middle. But it's definitely a question, because I don't think Cassius Howe has that potential to be that all-SEC kind of guy, but it's not a defensive line that is just stacked with All-American potential and NFL draft potential, at least as far as this year is concerned. So it is a question. What will help is they got 2 linebackers behind them that I think are very strong. You got Torian York, will be a 3-year starter at middle linebacker, and Scooby Williams, will linebacker, who was pretty dang good last year. And those two guys together will help this group a lot when it comes to run defense and things of that nature. So it is a question, but with how poor last season went, you'd like to think that things will turn around. And I think Cassius Howell, again, I think if he were to have 10, 11 sacks this season, I would not be shocked.
Interesting. So I'll get you out, finish up on this. So each side of the ball, then, what do you think is the biggest question on each side that they have going into training camp right now?
Yeah. I think offense, it's really just Marcel Reed as a passer.
Okay.
He did a great job last year when you consider the circumstances that he inherited, and really did not have a good receiving core, did not have a good tight end core, did not have Moss for the last few games. But that next level for him, what does it look like? He still has to prove himself as a passer. When you look at the deep ball numbers last year, they were not good for him. And again, you could say, hey, well, that's because his receivers could not get open. But at the end of the day, you still got to prove it, right? He also didn't put up a whole bunch of numbers. I don't know if he'll need to this year because, again, the running game could be so effective. But until he does it, there's always going to be that question of like, okay, is this guy going to put up 300 yards? He still hasn't done it in a game. Is he going to play well against a really good defense? He didn't play well against Texas, didn't play well against South Carolina last year, the two best defenses he faced. So it's definitely a question there. On the other side, defensively, it's got to be the defensive line just because of the guys they lost and not really having that surefire, proven, hey, this guy's going to be a draft pick, a top draft pick, or hey, this guy's going to be all SEC. I think Cassius Howell could have a really great season, but he hasn't shown it yet. There are a lot of guys on that D-line that, DJ Hicks, he could be a good starting defensive tackle, but he hasn't shown it yet. So there's a lot of questions because of the lack of kind of that star power on that defensive line and with how much they underachieved last year.
All right, great stuff from Carter Karels, as always, covering Texas A&M for Gig'em 24/7. You might have to bring everybody some Whataburger up from Texas when you come up here for the game.
They just got a Portillo's here.
Ooh, so, really?
I'm like, if they get a Portillo's here, how do they not have Whataburger in South Bend? It doesn't even make sense.
I know. I think the farthest north, I believe, didn't Patrick Mahomes bring a Whataburger to Kansas City like a couple years back? I think that's the farthest north that Whataburger is.
I think so, yeah. Maybe Patrick Mahomes will just inspire the Midwest to just put them everywhere. I don't know.
Maybe so. I mean, Yingling beer has made its way into Kansas and Missouri now. So if Yingling can migrate that far to the west, then Whataburger can just keep creeping up to the north, I think. Yeah. Just makes sense. All right, Carter, thanks as always. Look forward to seeing you up here in a couple months when Texas A&M comes to town.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean.
So that is Carter Karels, and Vince DeDario jumps in right now as he sits in the wings after getting his Texas A&M lesson for the day. And we'll talk about some of that stuff. Have you ever had Whataburger, Vince?
One time, I believe, when Dylan and I went down to Florida for a kicking camp.
Okay.
They had it down there, and we definitely did it. I don't know what I was expecting. I mean, it was good. A little underwhelming just because of like the
anytime something like that gets built up.
Yeah.
Like the In-N-Out is worn off for me. The first couple times I went to In-N-Out, thought it was great. Last couple times it's been fairly mid.
And that I've never had.
It's been a while since I've had a Whataburger. That's like the big,
because that's south. Like Whataburger is south, right?
Yeah.
And then
Texas
In-N-Out
is what I think of. Yeah, In-N-Out is mostly California. I think that's where it started.
San Francisco.
And I think, well, it's in San Francisco. I don't know if it started in San
Francisco. Well, no. I'm just
there was one I remember actually, because you're going to San Francisco. That's why you're asking, obviously.
That's correct.
There was an in and out down by like the wharf and that whole area if you're going down there.
Put it on the list.
Yeah.
Put it on the list.
Yeah. Let me see. Ant VR, Notre Dame's a 7.5-point favorite as of today against A&M.
Yeah, I could see that.
I can see it as well. Tommy wants to know, with the big announcement pending in the future, does he finally get his job offer to drive the IB bus?
Dude, this is Vince talking. I have no say in how this goes down, but if we actually can make this happen, I don't want to drive. So you'll be my first call. Like that's
right.
How I feel.
Because I've thought about that. Because like I want to do the RV, and like I've been wanting to get an RV. Like that's part of my future plan.
Like personally,
yeah. Like at some point, I want to have an RV. But
gotcha.
The decision is, how big is the RV going to be? Because especially like as you get older, you want to be getting into driving something that much bigger than I'm used to driving and all that kind of stuff. So,
Good point.
Yeah. But like for the purposes of like if we do this trip to Lambeau next year and we've got an RV lined up, heck yeah,
load it up. Let's
go. Tommy's in. All you have to do is probably bring us some burgers and we'll be ready to go. That's what it is.
I'm all about it. I think that'll be let's do this.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the announcement.
Oh, yeah.
I think what we're waiting on right now, I don't know if you got any more details today.
I did.
Brian, I think, wants to be sure that some technical things are taken care of before we make the public announcement of this.
That is correct. Very excited about it, as we are. So a lot of momentum behind this thing. So it's coming. It's coming down the track, folks. So
it'll be here.
Yeah.
I mean, like we know what it is, and like it's all official at this point. But again, like Brian wants to, wants to sew
make
things
sure all
up.
Either dotted, T's are crossed, because there's some technical things we got to work out. There's no doubt about that. Right. But
and I touched base with someone today, and I think that hopefully that stuff like we'll be able to, like, by the time you and I are back from vacation next week,
perfect,
we might be able to get it taken care of at that point. So maybe by the end of next week we can figure we can announce something.
Let's go.
If not, then early the week after that.
Oh, it's bigger than that, Father David. I got a new mic right here. We're good.
Yeah, Vince getting a new mic. No, it's going to be Jesse getting a new mic. Vince finally getting a new computer. That's what it'll be. Yeah. Okay, so are you ready for rapid fire, Vince?
Let's go, baby. It's the end of a long one for me. I'm ready for some rapid fire.
It's why you're here. By the way, Father David is here. Happy Canada Day. It is Canada Day. Yes.
Is that like 4th of July for us?
Explain Canada Day, Father David. I think
I just don't know.
I think that's kind of what it is.
Because there's like Boxing Day. I know that's a Canadian thing. And then there's some Canadian holidays that I'm just not familiar with. And so I'm always willing to be educated on the days.
By the way, I did notice this when I came in today as Johnny.
I did see that.
Screen names are back.
They were back for the afternoon show as well. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But it was very annoying the other way.
Their national birthday. So a little different than the 4th of July, but similar since, like, technically.
July 4th is our birthday, technically.
Sort of the pseudo birthday, right? Because it didn't become official for
correct
a little while after that.
Well, more than a little while, but like what other date would you pick?
Right.
I mean,
you have to, because that's when they signed the Declaration. Obviously.
Right. But yes, there was nothing. That was just guys in a room signing a piece of paper that didn't really start the United States. Technically, it just, they decided they were going to get after it. Right. But yeah.
Poutine fights. A little poutine. You ever had any poutine?
I don't even know what that's not even a word. I don't
poutine
even know what
is
that
like
means.
French fries with gravy and cheese curds on top.
That does not sound appetizing.
When we went to the Niagara Falls area and into Canada last year, we had some poutine at like a bar, and it was basically, it was not homemade gravy. Let's put it that way. It was obvious that it came out of a can or a jar or something like that. So I was a little disappointed.
Gravy
It was
expert.
my first poutine. Yeah, but it's like, oh, get this from the Heinz section, or
I just don't like stuff on my fries. I like naked fries.
okay.
If the fries can't stand alone, they're not good enough.
Little cheese fries every now and then. No cheese fries.
I've been known to dip into a cheese maybe, but I don't like the smothered because then it gets gooey and like, I like a little crunch to my fries, and the crunch goes away if you smother it and stuff.
That's true. That's
where I'm at.
All right. How about some topics? We talked, of course. We just got done. Wrapped up the interview with Texas A&M insider Carter Karels, first segment of the show. So I asked him the biggest question the Aggies have on each side of the ball going into training camp. Offensively, here's what he said. He started with
really just Marcel Reed as a passer. He did a great job last year when you consider the circumstances that he inherited, and really did not have a good receiving core, did not have a good tight end core, did not have Moss for the last few games. But that next level for him, what does it look like? He still has to prove himself as a passer. When you look at the deep ball numbers last year, they were not good for him. And again, you could say, hey, well, that's because his receivers could not get open. But at the end of the day, he's still got to prove it, right? He also didn't put up a whole bunch of numbers. I don't know if he'll need to this year because, again, the running game could be so effective. But until he does it, there's always going to be that question of like, okay, is this guy going to put up 300 yards? He still hasn't done it in a game. Is he going to play well against a really good defense? He didn't play well against Texas, didn't play well against South Carolina last year, the two best defenses he faced. So it's definitely a question there.
All right, so there you hear it from Carter Karels. Marcel Reed, the quarterback, as a passer. So scale of 1 to 10, you hear that. What's your confidence in the matchup between Notre Dame's secondary and Marcel Reed in September?
Well, I agree with Carter that is a potential weakness for Texas A&M early on in the season. And for the second year in a row, I am very happy that Notre Dame is playing Texas A&M early on in the season. You know what I mean? And I thought that last year. It proved to be accurate. I think that again this year. Obviously Notre Dame has a benefit of them coming up to Notre Dame with the noise and all of those different things that they're inevitably going to get. And I think that's going to affect Marcel Reed as the quarterback. And look, Notre Dame's defense is very good. We know this, right? We don't know some of the details with the Chris Ash defense and what it's going to look like and all of those different things. But you're essentially going up against a rookie quarterback who hasn't seen a defense like Notre Dame's, plain and simple. And so that's, advantage Notre Dame. It just is. And Notre Dame's secondary is going to be excellent. We think the front seven is going to be, pretty solid. So that's advantage Notre Dame. And so Marcel Reed is going to have his work cut out for him to come up to Notre Dame and be successful against this defense, or at least sustained success. He may be able to get loose, with his legs and things like that. But as a passer, get after it. They're going to get after him with the front seven, and then the secondary is going to make some plays on him.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have, like Carter also talked about the offensive line, and that's really the strength of the team, probably returning 7 guys from last year. But like, this is a running quarterback, Marcel Reed, who played, a good chunk last year, but he was sacked 14 times. That's a lot for a mobile quarterback to be sacked 14 times. And I think a lot of that is probably standing in the pocket too long, staring down receivers and the like, and getting taken down. So I think this is just a huge mismatch in favor of Notre Dame's defense. So like I'm giving this a 10 in terms of what this means for Notre Dame, because they've brought in, as Carter said, what should be better receivers than what they had last year. But there was a lot of hype, I thought, even on their receiving core going into last season, how good they could be. And they were fairly pedestrian, I think. Everyone knocks Notre Dame's receiver. So a lot of turnover there, a lot of new faces, and you're trying to get this guy who basically completes about 60% of his passes to be a consistent passer. he's probably going to build up some confidence because they're going to play a couple cupcakes in their first couple of games. This will be game 3 for them. It'll be game 2 for Notre Dame because of the bye after Miami. But I just feel like this is a huge mismatch in Notre Dame's favor in that game in week 3.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny listening to, Texas A&M fans after Notre Dame beat them. And then, of course, Marcel Reed comes onto the scene like, oh, there's no way you would have beaten Texas A&M if okay, well, we'll see. Because he's going to get his opportunity to face off against Notre Dame at Notre Dame Stadium. So we'll see if Texas A&M fans are as excited about Marcel Reed after game 3 for them as they were when he was running all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, from top to bottom, Notre Dame's roster is going to be better than last year. And I think that there are a lot more questions with Texas A&M's roster compared to a year ago. And we'll get into a couple of those question marks on the other side of the ball right now, because the Aggies lost 3 defensive linemen from last year's team to the NFL. So what's their biggest defensive question right now? Is that it?
It's got to be the defensive line, just because of the guys they lost and not really having that surefire, proven, hey, this guy's going to be a draft pick, a top draft pick, or hey, this guy's going to be all SEC. I think Cassius Howell could have a really great season, but he hasn't shown it yet. There are a lot of guys on that D-line that, DJ Hicks, he could be a good starting defensive tackle, but he hasn't shown it yet. So there's a lot of questions because of the lack of kind of that star power on that defensive line and with how much they underachieved last year. They bring back some guys that have played a lot of snaps like Albert Regis and DJ Hicks in the middle. But it's definitely a question because I don't think Cassius Howell has that potential to be that all-SEC kind of guy, but it's not a defensive line that is just stacked with All-American potential and NFL draft potential, at least as far as this year is concerned. It is a question, but with how poor last season went, you'd like to think that things will turn around.
So, Vince, you listen to that. How does this year's matchup in the trenches compare to the one we saw last year at College Station?
Does night and day ring a bell? Because
that's about it.
I mean, look, Notre Dame's offensive line had like 6 total starts going into last year, and Texas A&M was the first game on the road. We heard all about it, right? Against Texas A&M's front, defensive line that was just unbelievable, and they were really, really good. 3 of the guys got drafted to the NFL. All of those things. It's just not that way anymore. Now Notre Dame's got the experience on the offensive line, and Texas A&M is searching for some answers on the defensive line. I mean, it's a complete 180 from what it was last year. Yeah. And Notre Dame did pretty good against those guys last year. Let's be honest. Like,
they held their own. They held their own.
They held their own. At the very most, it was a stalemate, I would say, at the very most, in favor of Texas A&M, right? But Notre Dame held their own, and they were able to get some things accomplished against that defensive front offensively for Notre Dame. So it's a 180. Obviously, this is another check on the box for Notre Dame, and we'll see if this offensive line can take advantage in the first home game of the season.
Yeah, Beefeater says A&M had 8 5-stars in the 22 class. How did they blow that class so badly? Well,
we told you it was going to happen.
There's a reason Jimbo's not there anymore, right?
Correct. They gave out a lot of money, and now a lot of those players are playing for somebody else. I mean,
I'm just shocked, as I said when I was talking with Carter, that defense ended up being A&M's issue last year with Mike Elco as the head coach. And go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I still have a lot of faith in Mike Elco, which is what gives me pause before I'm like, Notre Dame's gonna smoke.
See, but I feel like, are we giving him too much benefit?
I don't know.
Of the doubt right now.
I don't know. That's a great question because look, A&M. It was, his first game as head coach of A&M against Notre Dame. You don't expect all the horses to be going in the same direction. You know what I mean? If you're Mike Elko, this is year 2 now. So you got a better handle on what's going on. We're going to see a couple of games, obviously, prior to the Notre Dame game. I am interested to see what this team looks like because I don't know that he had complete control at the end of last year. Things didn't end great at the end of last year. Again, I think Mike Elko is a good head coach. Is he a upper echelon head coach or was he Duke good? You know what I mean? So
exactly, because there's a difference.
That
some
remains
guys,
to be seen, I think.
Some guys can, sort of, like take those middle tier guys like that and build them up to a point.
Yeah.
And it's not like they won the ACC. They were much more competitive with him there, but it's a different set of circumstances and a different set of pressures when you go to a place like Texas A&M, where, let's face it, even as great as A&M fans think they are, they haven't won in forever, but they all act like, they've been winning forever.
They do. And they've had
like one good year in the last 30.
Right. And that was with, Johnny Football and the whole deal. And then they came crashing down pretty hard after that. So it's Texas. They're, they think they're better than they are. It's not overly surprising. I mean, look at the University of Texas. They've thought that they're really good at football for a long time too. And that really hasn't come to fruition here until recently. So, and that still remains to be seen. This is a preseason situation, so it's Texas. A&M's always going to have the money. They're always going to think they're better than they are. It's going to be interesting because I think they're going to get humbled a little bit up at Notre Dame.
I do too. I think advantage to both teams on the offensive line, like on the offensive side of the ball, when we're looking at the trenches, the questions are going to be on the defensive side. I just feel like A&M probably has more questions at this point because again, like when you underachieve with 3 NFL draft picks on your defensive line, like that's a major red flag right there. Because there was other stuff where you heard in the full interview where Carter was talking about it. It's like none of those guys really lived up to what the expectations were last year. So I think that it's a very important matchup, and I think it's another big check mark in Notre Dame's favor against the Aggies. All right, one more as we revisit some of the Carter Karels interview. The Aggies also had major issues in the secondary last season as it went along. And as you, if you were listening to the interview, you heard me say to Carter, after losing to USC in the Las Vegas Bowl, head coach Mike Elco said his team couldn't defend the forward pass.
Elco, after last season, not only did he say they can't defend the forward pass, but he said they don't know how to play zone defense, zone coverage, which, last time I checked, that's pretty important to playing defense.
Exactly.
And so as a defensive mind, he's decided, okay, I'm going to be a lot more involved now. I'm not going to fire anybody. I'm not going to demote anybody, but I'm going to be the guy calling the defense and helping out with what's going on. And he's has a background as kind of a safeties specialist. He also brought in the defensive coordinator from James Madison, Lyle Hemphill, to kind of help with the safeties. They now have like 3 secondary coaches. And so there's a lot of an emphasis on improving the secondary, improving the defense, having Elco more involved. And, you look at Elco's track record, last year really was an anomaly. Like that does not happen often for him where the whole defense just crumbles. And they had the talent. So it's one of those things where it wasn't like they just had a bad group and they couldn't do much with it. They underachieved as a group. So there's a lot more focus there. They added some guys in the portal, and they brought a lot back, at least from the back end of the defense. And so I think that's why there's reasons for optimism. But again, when you have a lot of the same characters from last season, you just wonder how much better is it going to be? Is it going to be a strength? Probably not. But if it can just be serviceable, I think that'll be good for this team.
Just try to be serviceable, and that'll be good for Texas A&M.
Well,
fill in the blank. Oh, go ahead, Vince.
No. Go ahead. We'll do your thing. Sorry.
All these questions A&M has right now have you feeling blank.
Way overconfident than I maybe should be. That's the problem. Like what I'm hearing from Carter Karels, who covers this team a heck of a lot closer than you and I do. He doesn't seem all that enthusiastic about this squad.
No, not at all.
Which is a problem. But I mean, look, We just got done doing a show about the wide receivers for Notre Dame. We broke down the wide receiver room, what the expectations are, and all of those different things, and how, they need to be consistent in big games, and they need to, all of these different things. They might have a chance to make a dent in game 2 if the secondary is the way that Carter is explaining, the way they are. I mean,
I think so.
Look, Mike Elco is going to do everything to stop the run. I mean, it's still going to be early in the season. Jeremiah Love is still the Heisman Trophy guy. All of these different things. CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie.
Now game plan could change a little bit based on what they see in that
after Miami. Sure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, how can you look at Notre Dame's offense and be like, hey, we got to stop the pass game? Well, it's okay, whatever Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price do. I still think it's number one priority to stop the run and then make the freshmen beat us.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I think you still want to make the young quarterback have to beat you with his arm.
Right.
Like that's got to be a game plan. But
so how could the wide receivers not be licking their chops?
If you've got questions, if you've got questions,
man,
with your defensive line and the secondary, front end, back end, okay, you've got a couple good linebackers. That's a very small fraction of the 11 guys that you put on the field. So it's just sounding more and more like this is, again, like they've got some stuff they're going to find out about their team in training camp. Maybe some things happen and it is going to be early, because like if you're Texas A&M, I think you'd rather play Notre Dame earlier than later. From Notre Dame's perspective, like this is almost like, even though it's Mike Elko's second year, and I think that we thought, last year that this year seemed like the year that you would probably, be more, not afraid, but, like there would be more of a threat from Texas A&M because it is year 2. But like it almost feels like a brand new team for them, and they've got many more questions than they had going into last year. From the quarterback, can he be a consistent passer? The secondary, can they cover anybody? The defensive line, can they come close to expectations? Those are 3 major questions for any football.
Yeah.
Like any one of those is going to be major. They've got 3 of them to deal with going into their training camp.
Wild. Absolutely wild. I guess we'll see. I mean, I'll obviously watch both games that they play prior to playing to Notre Dame, and we'll see what it looks like. But, man, that is not a great place to be if you're an A&M fan.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Shift gears on a little basketball. Fill in the blank. Some interesting news today. Notre Dame men's basketball playing Kansas first and then Rutgers in their first 2 games of the Players Era Championship in Las Vegas in November this season. Is blank.
Probably 2 losses for Notre Dame, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know. Rutgers had, 2 top 4 draft picks in the NBA draft last week, and they were sub 500. I still don't know.
No, that's a good point.
But
no, Notre Dame's got a great shot against Rutgers. I think they're a very similar program right now. I do not think they have a great shot against Rock Chalk, which, hey, it's win-win for you. So
that's right.
If they were playing in Kansas, in Lawrence, it might be a road trip situation.
Oh man, I might have to find a way to get there, but they're not. So
yeah,
it's going to be in Vegas Monday, November 24th. It's going to be a 3:30 in the afternoon Eastern time game.
What?
For the Notre Dame Kansas game. Interesting time to have awful. That. Then the next day they're going to play Rutgers at 1:00 in the afternoon. They lost to Rutgers by 1 point in overtime last year, but I like just that alone right there. The fact that they're playing these afternoon games, because remember when they went to Vegas last year, they were playing at like 11 o'clock
like
at
the middle
midnight,
of the night.
and like all these late night games, they were getting done at like 1 and 2, at maybe even like 3 o'clock in the morning on that one, because they started so late. Yeah. So at least they'll get afternoon, but Monday, 3:30 in the afternoon on a Monday, the week of Thanksgiving. That's
we're all working. We're all like, we're not thinking about work because it's the Thanksgiving holiday. I'm pretty sure we go to school like Monday and Tuesday only. And those are the 2 games that they've got. They're 2 days that they've got games. Like, come on.
Right.
That's brutal.
First meeting, though, between Notre Dame and Kansas since the 87-88 season. Wow. It's been a while. And I was trying to think. I forgot to look this up before I started. Give me a second here. I think it was 2015. There was a chance in the NCAA tournament on that second team that ended up in the Elite 8 where they would have faced Kansas, like they were in line to potentially play Kansas. Maybe it was 2014.
When were you at Kansas? What years were you there?
I was there. No, I was there from 91 to 95.
Okay, so you missed the 88 game. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, in 2015, yeah, the year they played Wichita State in the tournament, Notre Dame, that would have been Kansas, because I think Wichita State beat Kansas to get to the Sweet 16. If Kansas would have beaten Wichita State, they would have played in the tournament that year. But so yeah, like this will be the in the 88 season for Kansas was their national championship season as well. So that was the last time Notre Dame faced them. And I believe that was at Allen Fieldhouse, if I remember right.
Probably didn't work out well for Notre Dame, I'm guessing.
I doubt it. It was toward the end of the Digger era. But should be a lot of fun.
It should be. Well, I mean, losing isn't fun, Sean. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's like, I realize Kansas is Kansas, and like they had one of their worst seasons in a long time last year, and they've kind of had to retool and rebuild.
Yeah,
and like they've got some dudes coming in because they always do, in terms of recruits and stuff like that. But
that'll be interesting.
November,
anyway. You're right.
Who knows?
You're right.
Fun. Yep.
We'll be talking about it, I'm sure. Looking forward to it.
Yep. Fill in the blank. The Milwaukee Bucks trading Notre Dame alum Pat Coneton to the Charlotte Hornets today is blank.
Oh man, that's disappointing. I mean, he's literally going into NBA oblivion.
Dregs. I know.
Oh my gosh. Like I feel so bad for him, man. Like he's making good money, obviously. I think he's on like his third contract in the NBA, which I don't know that I would have ever guessed would have happened when he was here at Notre Dame. But he has carved out a niche role for himself, up in Milwaukee and, won an NBA championship, I believe, and all these different things. And now he's gone, and he's gone to Charlotte. Like
crazy. He had been in Milwaukee for 7 years. He's already been in the league for 10 years at this point.
Isn't that wild? Because he was with the Blazers for a couple of years.
3 years, and then Milwaukee after that. And the Bucks made some moves today because they also waived Damian Lillard. Now he tore his Achilles toward I think it was in the playoffs, kind of like, a few weeks earlier, obviously, than Tyrese Halliburton, but he tore an Achilles. And so, rather than pay him, something like $113 million, they got rid of him. And it seems like maybe they're kind of like, they were definitely offloading salary with him. They'll save some money with Pat Coneton.
I mean, Pat was making a decent chunk. I mean, he's kind of their
because he's a veteran now.
Yeah.
So, and it's just like he's kind of, and like you said, it's a huge step down going from playing with one of the, 2 or 3 best players in the league in Giannis. Now you're going to Charlotte. Like Milwaukee was the 5th best team in the East this year. They won 48 games. Charlotte won 19 games. They were the 2nd worst team in the East. So
brutal.
Maybe it's an opportunity, for more playing time and, get to score a little more or whatever, but that's going to
play more.
That's going to be a struggle, man.
There's no chance he's not a starter down there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. Not that I know my Charlotte depth chart, but there's no way he's not a starter down there on a team that won 19 games last year. So they're bringing him in to be a starter, and, he's going to play a bunch more. And I think one of the reasons that he's lasted as long as he had is that he's the 6th man. He doesn't, there's a lot of tread on the tires, you know what I'm saying? So if he would have immediately gone to a place like a Charlotte or name your crappy NBA team, he may not be still in the league. You know what I mean? So
true.
Look, he's made his money. Obviously, that's awesome. I just feel bad that this is where he's ended up.
Feels like he's kind of entering into that journeyman portion of his career after 10 years.
Yeah.
Because it's like you've been around now, you're a veteran, but maybe that's like when the trade deadline rolls around next year. Maybe that's good for him. If he's having a good year, he gets, they trade him to a contender, like midway through the season, like January or whatever. Like the silver lining that maybe Pat Coneton can point to.
I mean, off the top of your head, how much money do you think he's made in his NBA career?
Ooh, $20 million?
Double.
Really? $40 million?
41.6.
Wow.
Yeah.
A nice life. That's a nice life in 10 years.
So, I mean, I don't feel bad for him in that regard, obviously. But so he had a player option for this year. This is the last year of a 3-year deal. And so he exercised his player option and then they traded him. So this is the last year on his deal. So you're right. Trade deadline, he could end up someplace else as going to be an unrestricted free agent for the 26-27 year. So yeah, he could play for half a year and then head on out. It's definitely possible.
Yeah. I mean,
he's going to make $9.4 million next
this
year.
This is the time when a guy like him finds out what the definition of being a pro means, because no matter what, you're getting a nice check. You're living a good life. You got to go out. You got to suck it up.
$9 million, dude. Like, he's gonna make $9 million to play a lot of losing basketball down in Charlotte. But it's made $41.6.
That's
$41 million, man.
Wow.
Woohoo!
Good
that
for
could buy
him.
you a pretty nice place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yep. Good for him being deceptively athletic. The moniker that followed him out of Notre Dame. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. Good for him. That's right.
Yep. Fill in the blank. It's blank that EA Sports is bringing back its dormant college basketball game in 2028 after they stopped making the game 12 years ago.
It's cool, but they also need to revisit the college baseball game that they had out a long time ago. So that's where I'm at. I don't
know how popular that was.
It wasn't, I'm sure. But they did have Frank Eck Stadium on there, and I enjoyed playing that game. I did have it. It was for my PlayStation 2 back in the day. But look, I think the video game market is still one that you can exploit and still one that you can get people to get excited about. Obviously, people got excited about the NCAA football game. It will be nothing like that. But there's an audience for college basketball, I would hope. It'll be interesting to see like the NIL stuff that you can do and like all that kind of jazz. But,
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think in the release that I saw, it's riding the coattails of the success of the college football game. I think people are much more excited about the college football game. And to me, what makes it tougher is like you almost need a lot more of the, like I know in some of the past versions of the games, they've had some of the great historical teams and stuff like that. And that's actually where the lawsuit started, like the Ed O'Bannon, because they had UCLA's team on there and it was obviously Ed O'Bannon on there, and that's what ultimately shut all this stuff down for a while. But like because of one and done, like it's most people don't know anybody that's even on a college basketball team.
Point.
Like it's not like you've got a Bobby Hurley and Grant Hill and Christian Laettner and that whole group together, or any of those guys, UCLA or Arkansas in the 90s. So I mean, it's going to be fun if you're diehard basketball, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited about it. But I don't think that it can quite live up to what the excitement of the college football game, and the fact that it's going to be 3 years. I don't know what takes 3 years to develop a game like this. That kind of
good point.
Shocked me as well. It's going to be 3 years before it even comes out.
Good point.
So Vince, this is July 1st, and that means it's what's become known as Bobby Bonia Day.
I love this day.
This is like we were talking about Coneton and his money. Bobby Bonia, 62 years old now. He's retired and hasn't played since 1999, but he collects today his 15th installment check of almost $1.2 million in deferred money from the New York Mets. They paid him, or they deferred his salary in 2000, and it is so far turned into almost $18 million with one check every year for the last 15 years not to play the 2000 season. And they're going to pay him for the next 10 years. He'll collect another $10.7 million for that. I mean, is there any better retirement plan in America than the one that Bobby Bonia ended up with?
Well, and what's funny is they, when Shohei signed with the Dodgers and they talked about all this deferred money and all this other stuff, they acted like that was some sort of a new thing. It's like, Mets did that back in 1999.
Right.
With the deferred money. And that's why we have Bobby Bonia Day every July 1st. And every July 1st, I'm reminded of the fact that he's just sitting on his tail making $1 million every
I know.
July 1st.
I
It
know.
is amazing. Good for him.
I wish someone would have deferred my salary, like 20 years ago. And that paid me interest on it. It wouldn't come anywhere close to what Bonia's making, but still, it would have that would have been a nice retirement account. Every year they bring this up, and it's like it gets like it never wears off when you just look at the numbers that he's going to get out of this, because it was literally like $1 or $2 million that they deferred, and it's going to turn into almost $30 million over 25 years by the time it's all said and done.
Good for him.
Man.
I mean, so smart. They paid him not to play, Sean. They paid
I know.
him not to play.
I know. And, again, I have no idea if Bobby Bonia does anything, besides take these checks, but for $1.2 million per year, like, you're living a pretty good life, just doing whatever you're doing and not having to worry about too much.
Yep.
62 years old.
No doubt.
He'll be 72 years old by the time he's done taking checks from the New York Mets.
That's hilarious.
So-
Who won that one? The Mets or Bobby Bonia?
Exactly.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Today is also the unofficial day. Maybe it's the official day that Sports Talk Radio was born. 1987,
Really?
WFAN in New York City became the country's first 24-hour all-sports radio station.
1987.
1987.
And they started it in July when it's the worst month possible to talk about sports.
I know. Think about that.
The worst possible month to talk about sports.
Literally, you're in the deadest period of sports
Yes.
right now.
100%.
But I guess in New York City, you've got, like Yankees, Mets, and, like they're a baseball city. So
this is true. That's a good point. I mean, you can always talk baseball, but
yeah. But then little more than 2 years later, they launched a show known as Mike and the Mad Dog. Mike Francesa, Chris Mad Dog Russo, and Mad Dog, of course, does a lot of stuff on ESPN now too.
I remember hearing about that show.
Yep.
Obviously ESPN came around in 78 or 79. And so they saw that there was a TV equivalent, and it was gaining popularity in the 80s, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, if you would have asked me to guess, I would have said radio came first, because that's usually how it works. But in this regard, TV came first and radio followed suit. And it's been kind of
That's
no
true.
stopping them since then.
That's true.
It's impressive.
Yep. And now you've got people like us podcasting sports every day as well.
That's right. And
The medium's changed a little bit.
It has, but there's still radio out there. That's still a very good thing. And there's a lot of
That's right.
radio stations that do the simulcast thing with podcasting and things like that. So, it's
Not a lot. Maybe that's the future.
maybe that could be the future.
Like McAfee, took his podcast to
That's
TV.
true. That's true.
I don't know. Maybe that's the forward thinking, like branch out, diversify a
Right.
little bit.
I mean, there's
Interesting.
nothing wrong with having multiple streams of revenue potentially, and
Revenue,
and
distribution.
different. Yeah, you're hitting different audiences and things like that. So, maybe we can con a radio station into letting us do a show. And we can
Who knows?
simulcast it. So
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows? All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for today. We're going to wrap it up with that. Fairly short and sweet. We went a little bit more than an hour.
It's all good.
Vince's cheeks are probably numb after sitting in that chair for 4+ hours or so.
Very, very numb. Probably different set of cheeks. And you're right.
Hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Right.